Good evening. This is Doug Gerlach from iClubcentral. Welcome to our Investment Club webinar. Today is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. And I'm very pleased tonight to be introducing our Senior Support Specialist, Sean Pulrang, who's going to be reviewing the features of my iClub's BrokerSync application, a tool that you can use within your My iClub website to help keep your accounting up to date. I'll be turning it over to Sean in just a minute. I wanted to remind everyone that our upcoming webinar schedule is posted on iclub.com. Next month in November, we'll be taking a look at managing members and guests in My iClub, all the features that help you manage your investment club membership, as well as what access visitors might have within your club, the various options and features related to that. And then in December, our annual Closing the Club's Books webinar will be on Tuesday, December 21st. In this webinar, we'll review the procedures that clubs use to close out their calendar year and make sure their books are accurate and get ready for a successful preparation of their club's tax returns. In January, then, we'll talk about preparing the club's 2021 tax returns. We will be going over what's new, what's different for 2021, and you won't be surprised to hear, I'm sure, that the Internal Revenue Service has made some adjustments to the partnership-related returns for that impact investment club tax returns. So we'll be reviewing those changes and how to use our club tax printer program to prepare your club's state and federal tax returns. And then in February, on the 15th, is our annual Investment Club Tax Clinic, where you can bring your questions and we'll have an interactive session and work through any problems you might have. And that will make sure that you're able to meet the March 15th federal deadline for filing your club's annual tax returns with the Internal Revenue Service. So we've got plenty of great content coming up, but tonight we're going to turn it over to Sean Pulrang. As I mentioned, he's our Senior Support Specialist, and many of you, if you have had any questions and contacted our support department, will have interacted with Sean. He manages our frequently asked questions module, which is several hundred questions and answers related to iClubcentral's programs and My iClub, the tax printer, etc. And he has been working for iClubcentral since 2002, so coming up on his 20-year work anniversary in just a few months. So without a doubt, he is one of the most informed people about investment clubs and the My iClub application, and that's why I'm pleased to welcome him tonight. As a reminder, the handout for this presentation is available in the handout tab of the GoToWebinar application. It's a PDF file. You can download it to print quickly or save for future reference. And the questions box is also available there. So please type your questions in. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a special Q&A session where we can address questions about BrokerSync or other questions related to My iClub. And I'll be hanging around and monitoring the questions, and so I'll do my best to help out as we go through the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean. Sean, take it away.
Thanks, Doug. Glad to be here. Thank you for probably one of the greatest introductions I will ever get here. So as you said, tonight we're going to take a little bit of a quick tour through the BrokerSync, the My iClub feature that lets you download transactions directly into your club. So first, we get this question a lot: what is BrokerSync? What does it do? So it connects your myiclub.com site directly to the brokerage's website. It's fairly seamless. It goes in, it downloads transactions. You can put in for as much time as the broker has. We generally sit in 90 days, but you can put in the entire club history if that's really what you're after. The BrokerSync will import your buys, sells, splits, dividends, really the most common transactions that you get for any of your securities. It puts them into your books. We get the information from the broker so you know that it's going to match up come the end of the year when you're working on taxes. It will also import any interest, expenses, and cash dividend transactions from the brokerage. So we put this together for one thing to save clubs a bit of time. We have clubs. We know that clubs love to use the dividends, get the dividend reinvestment. So a big part of it is the BrokerSync makes sure that all of those dividends that you're getting month in, month out get entered, again, with as little effort as possible from you, both the cash only and the reinvested dividend. And again, also it will handle entering the buys, sells, splits, and everything else. All of the really standard transactions that you're going to run into month in, month out over the life of the club. So right now, we have a handful of brokers here. As you can see on the list right now, we've got the Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, Interactive Brokers, and the E-Trade. So these are largely based on how many clubs we know are using these brokerages. We try to go sort of top to bottom. TD right now is the leader, as I understand it from the latest graphs, by a fairly wide margin, but some of the others are catching up. So we do send out surveys periodically, so we can keep track if clubs suddenly start picking up other brokerages and using those a little bit more often. We can add those to our to-do list, as they say. Now, I should also say, take a minute here, just a page or two. BrokerSync is not, and this is a question and some confusion that we get sometimes. It's not automated. You do need to sign in, as it says here, either the treasurer or another member who's been given the privileges on the people page to make accounting entries for the club. Someone needs to sign in periodically, click the buttons, put in the login and password, set the timer, everything else. Also, we don't get identifying information about member deposits or checks that are coming in. All we see from the broker is a line item that says an incoming deposit and the amount. So the BrokerSync does not import or put in your member deposits. Those you still have to do the old-fashioned way. Sign in, go under accounting, put the members, and put in the amounts there. I should also point out, because this is another point of confusion we've run into a few times, the BrokerSync does not import prices or account balances. It just imports a list of transactions. So when you're going to do the valuations, those are not coming from the broker. Those we get from an outside source. Also, it does not import spin-offs or mergers. Those, similar to the member deposits, those you still need to do sort of the old-fashioned way. However, thanks to folks like Russell Malley, who go out and do the digging into all the filings, we have, just as Doug said, a large list on our FAQ site that will take you through a lot of the more popular and in some ways twisty, turny, not so popular mergers, spin-offs, and so forth. So with that out of the way, we'll just go through a little bit of the actual use of the BrokerSync. So as with almost every direction that I give to folks when I'm talking with them, I say, you go up near the top of the page, you click accounting, and then you go down the left-hand side here, and you're going to click BrokerSync. It's going to take you to this in-between page. Now there's a little paragraph here, but what it's basically asking, as the buttons say, is do you want to make a backup before you continue, or do you want to continue without making the backup? This is another one where we could, I think, just as easily skip the continue without backup. It's such a rare case unless you've been doing a backup within the last few minutes or maybe the last hour or so before doing the BrokerSync. It's really not a good reason to skip that. So I will assume everybody going forward will always get to this page and click that backup my data and continue. Next, you'll see a list of the current brokerages. Again, TD, Schwab, Fidelity, and so forth. You click the link to select which is yours. And I'm going to go through a little bit here, again, each of the brokerages. So if you're using Fidelity, I will have a screenshot for that, but we're going to start here as it shows with the TD Ameritrade. You select where it says the My iClub account. That is to say, any dividends that you're getting in, any interest, any money that's coming in from selling shares, going out from buying shares, that just controls where does the My iClub put the money in or take the money out. There's also the import cash flows box, which we can get into this a little bit later if anyone's interested, but as a general rule of thumb these days, I suggest not to click that to help avoid unwanted transactions getting brought into the club records. Next, you're going to pick how many days. Default, we have a 90 days, but you can certainly use one of the other options there, the calendar year, which will take you back to January 1st of whatever year you happen to be sitting in front of the computer at. Or, as I said right near the beginning, you can click the All Records. That will go out and get every single transaction that the broker has for your club. I will say that one, I don't think we see too much, but it is there just in case. Now, as a note, TD Ameritrade has recently switched over to doing a little bit of extra authentication. So when you go to click that import button, you will want to have your cell phone handy because TD will be trying to send you a text message with a 6-digit code normally. So you'll click import, the system will start to think about it, it'll send the request to TD, TD will send the thing to your phone beeps, and you'll get an extra window to type a code number in. Again, a little bit of extra security there. Fidelity, somewhat similar. What you'll notice though is it does not have that extra text me a code number here. Similarly though, you're picking what account any of the cash is coming in or going out. You're leaving that import cash flows blank. You're putting in your brokerage login and password. And an interesting and nice feature on Fidelity is if you have multiple accounts connected to the same login and password, you can put in the specific account at Fidelity that you want to get the transactions from. Interactive Broker, one of the newer ones there, has a little bit of a different system set up. You'll notice they have the fields there for the token and query ID. There's no login and password with Interactive Broker. What you need to do there is, as you'll see in the little link where it says, make sure you've generated the token for your IBRK account. That is to say, with Interactive, you go to their site and you tell them that you're going to be getting you want your transactions to be brought into a third party, and they will generate those numbers there. One they'll call the token, and one they'll call the query ID. So again, instead of a login and password, instead of the traditional login and password there, you'll get some code numbers from Interactive. It's maybe one less thing to memorize because generally the way we set this up is once you put those in, and as long as you're using the same browser and you don't have something catastrophic, you don't have to go get a new computer, you shouldn't need to be putting both of those in every single time. You'll come here, double check and confirm the number perhaps, put in your account number, again, pick the dates, and say import, and away you go. E-Trade. E-Trade is set up a little bit similar to the TD in that they have the option for a little bit of extra security. The difference being in this case, E-Trade, you'll generate the code or you'll get the code set up before you even click the import. You've made your selections. You'll do the little two-step with E-Trade. They'll get you the code. You put that in. It is only good for a few minutes, generally speaking. We don't store it on the site for more than a few minutes. Really, we put the code number in, you click import, and within about a minute or two after the transactions have been downloaded and brought into your club, just like a snap, we delete that code number from off our server so it doesn't sit around waiting for another import. You may, depending on if you do it more than once in the day or so, you may end up needing more than one security code there. So this is what's happening afterwards. You click that import. In the background, again, you won't really see this, but the BrokerSync goes out, signs into the brokerage's site, downloads your club's transactions, which, since it's only text, it doesn't take too long, but depending on the club history, the speed of the internet, and all the rest, you give it a minute or two, and then the import will complete. You'll see a new message In this case, I took a test shot here. It says it will say success. In this case, it will say 12 new transactions. So that'll be however many new transactions were imported from the file that just got downloaded. You click the accounting tab. Again, this is one of those default behaviors you learn after a while with the My iClub. Almost every instruction will start with click the accounting tab near the top of the page. That brings you back to your club records, and your import is done. From there, you want to go double check what's been imported. From that accounting tab, you go down the left-hand side, best place to start, click that View Edit Transactions under the Securities heading. So you'll get a page that'll look like this. It'll give you, recent transactions, and we've got just a sampling here, income. In this case, now this beginning balance, that's one where you can tell, oh, that was something that I did on my own. In this case, that was not brought in by the broker. That is hand entered. But you will get, again, a similar screen to this. And if you click on any one of the transactions, let me jump back just a second there. We've got that air lease security income transaction right near the top. So I've clicked on that. In this case, it gives the transaction description, the date, ex-dividend, and so forth. And then you can tell down in the comments, it says imported from Ameritrade, 10/13/2021. You will see that for every single transaction that gets brought in by the BrokerSync. So if you're trying to remember when something was done, you can double check the transactions. Every single one of them will have a line that will say imported from whoever your broker happens to be on the given date. It's a fairly easy way to tell the difference between transactions that were brought in by the BrokerSync versus something if you might have entered a transaction by hand. You won't see that sort of comment. It'll just be a blank spot or whatever note you might have made to yourself when making the entry. So, as nice as this is, we do have a few things, some questions that come up. You'll notice at the very beginning, I had a couple brokers listed that said beta testing. That's something that we do when we're still getting used to the system a little bit. Generally speaking, we list a club, or I should say a brokerage, as beta, usually for the first few months after we add it to the list. It's mostly just a heads up to any of the clubs using this that we're still gathering information. We're still getting used to how the brokerage lists some of their transactions. There are things that we don't see that often. Sometimes the brokerage will change how they list a transaction. So while we are getting comfortable with the fact that we do or do not recognize how the brokerage operates, we put these things in beta. There shouldn't really be anything to worry about. Worst case, if you run into a problem, you get in touch with us. We send it over to our engineering. They figure out what's going on, make the fix, usually not more than a day or two. You will also see sometimes duplicate entries. If you're doing any of the entries by hand, the chance for this goes up. And really the most common thing is that some part of the information you've entered may not match 100% to what the brokerage has on their records. I will say personally, I see this a lot with dividends, where the brokerage will list the dividend and the ex-dividend date, and sometimes the brokerage will list one of those dates on the weekend when really nothing happens. But because they're going by the technical rules, they will list something on a given day, where if you're doing this by hand, you might enter one or two days different. You might enter it on a Friday, the broker had it on a Saturday, you enter it on a Sunday, they have it on a Monday. Any little thing like that, when the transactions are getting imported, if things do not match up exactly in what you might have entered by hand versus what comes in through the BrokerSync file, you can get a duplicate entry. So again, it's not a big deal. Any transaction in the My iClub, you can go in, you can check the details. As I mentioned earlier, you can easily tell by looking at two transactions. The one from the brokerage will have that line that says imported from the brokerage on the given date. So if you're checking through, if you do see a duplicate, it's pretty easy to find the one that is the official record from brokerage versus was entered. We generally suggest if you run into something like that, delete the one that did not come from the broker. I will say also, and this is a little bit rare, clubs, I think these days it seems like clubs are more and more unifying down to a single account. But if you've got a case where you do have a separate bank, maybe a local bank, a credit union, and a separate account of the brokerage, sometimes you might slip a little picking the account when you're setting up the BrokerSync. You might accidentally pick the bank. You might accidentally pick suspense. I will say, if that happens, it's fairly easy. You go back, assuming you followed our advice. You go back, you go into the backup, and you say, okay, recover that backup. You go back and redo the BrokerSync and just double check, double check that you choose the right account. This one I have seen a few times. If you accidentally select calendar year or all records, BrokerSync will download and enter transactions from, depending on where you are, the start of the year or as far back as the brokerage has records for. So if you're a new club, this generally isn't an issue. If you've got maybe a few months to a year or so worth of records, it's not really going to be a problem. Where we warn clubs to take extra caution, to be careful about what date range they're selecting, is if you've got one of those longer term clubs, the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30-year clubs, and the BrokerSync is only a few years old, be very careful that you do not accidentally select the all records. You might get a good 15, 20 years worth of records. Again, it can be a little bit of a shock if you look in and suddenly have a stock that the club hasn't owned for 5 or 6 years, or if you suddenly have a lot more shares of something than you used to. But again, that can all be undone. It can be rolled back. You made that backup. You have a safety net. You go in, tell it to recover the backup, and just double check when you go back and redo that BrokerSync. And we will also see sometimes where you will get an error that says, oh, there's a problem with the login and password. So, as I noted with the TD Ameritrade, a few months ago, they started rolling out a little bit of enhanced security. So sometimes you might need to go back and double check the login and password are still working at the broker. You might need to double check whether your broker has in fact changed their security settings. And I will say another one not listed on this slide is with the increase in the number of programs and whatnot that offer to remember logins and passwords for you. Your browser will offer to remember them. Your toolbars will offer to remember them. Your mice sometimes probably offer to remember them. Be careful with those, because when you get to our site and you get to the page for the BrokerSync, they don't recognize that what you're actually looking for is the login and password for your brokerage and not for the My iClub site. I know this happens to me. Every time I go into the BrokerSync site, it fills in my login and password for My iClub, and I have to go through, delete back the login, delete the password, and then put in the specific login and password for my own brokerage. So it's something, as I say, not on the slide. My apologies there, but something to keep an eye on, that you're not accidentally sending your My iClub login and password out to the broker by accident. So, as I've mentioned a couple of times in passing, if you find duplicate transactions attributed to the wrong account, something where it says multiple BBAL transactions, is shorthand there we use for a beginning balance transaction in the cash journal. So common things for that. You picked a date range that you didn't quite mean to. You may have picked the wrong account. You may have checked that import cash flows box. Again, do suggest, at least for the time being, leave that blank. And as I've mentioned going into this, any of those times, if it's 1 or 2 transactions, maybe it's faster for you to just go in and delete those 1 or 2 duplicates. But if you've got more than a handful, maybe more than a half dozen or so, I'll say you're better off just go into the backup, restore from the backup that you did before you went in to do the BrokerSync, and just go back and redo it and double check again the settings that you're choosing there. So this is, and as I said before, every single thing starts with go up to accounting. From accounting, in this case, you're going to utilities, backup manager, and every backup you make has the date and time that it was made. You go in, you click recover, it takes a few seconds, and the site will roll back to whatever the state of the records happen to be just before you did the BrokerSync. So that was kind of whirlwind. Doug, is there anything pending there?
Yeah, well,
Or do we want to carry on?
Well, thank you, Sean. I think that was a great overview. Marty asked about member deposits and whether or not they are imported, and if the My iClub system can identify the member using the sense method of identification.
That is something we would like to be able to do. At least for the moment, though, we do not have that. That's why that cash flows is there, so that at some point we can effectively flip the switch when we get that all worked out. So at least for the moment, as I mentioned, I think near the very beginning, we don't get any identifying information. So if you do happen to check it by accident, what you'll see is one of those, as I mentioned, that beginning balance, the BBAL transaction there will show up, and it'll just show a lump sum being added to the brokerage's account. So again, you can go in, you can just delete that if it's just the one thing, but unfortunately for the moment, importing member deposits is not something that it does.
I'll just add to that what Marty referred to in his question was a method that's used by clubs that are fully electronic, where members are transmitting their monthly member payments directly to the broker. They're not writing checks, they're making electronic payments. And the idea is that each member gets assigned a various cents amount, a unique cents amount. So 13 cents, 18 cents, 32 cents, 12 cents. And so every member, when they make their payment, append that cents amount to their contribution. So not everyone is making the same amounts, but if you're worried about it, you can always add another dollar or two on top of it. But the idea is that then when your broker statement arrives, you can see the incoming cash flows, and by the cents column of those incoming cash flows, you can identify which member transmitted that payment. So it doesn't work if you've got a stack of checks that you're depositing in a brokerage account or transferring from a bank account. It really only works if everyone is automated, and then the idea is that it would sort of simplify things in the system. In My iClub, we would allow you to assign every member a unique cents amount, and so that works as long as you've got fewer than 100 members. Beyond that, then it becomes something of a problem. But you can recycle those cents amounts as members depart as well. So it's a unique method. It's a clever way to accommodate member deposits. But as Sean explained, it's not something we're doing currently. It is on the list, and so if that is something that you would find most useful, do send us a note, send us support an email, or send me an email, and we will take that into account as we plan out our future development for My iClub. Well, with that, Sean, I think that will wrap up our presentation. So thank you very much for that informed presentation. Thanks to all of you for attending our presentation tonight. We'll look forward to seeing you next month when we look at the membership, member, visitor, guest options, including the message boards, file access, what members and visitors can do, how you can configure it. So we're going to cover the gamut of all of those transactions. And then we're into the year end and club tax preparation season. Our engineers and Sean are already hard at work on the federal e-filing and state tax preparation modules. So we've been working on it for several months, but now forms are being released by the states and the IRS in their close to final format, so that really gives us plenty of work to do to release the 2021 version of the Club Tax Printers. Thanks again. Wish you all the best, and we'll see you next time at our next Investment Club webinar.